Hey!
Hey!
We haven't quite got used to the new screen yet, and so, as I noticed yesterday, it starts with, hang on, hello! So I don't know what we got at the start of that.
Very odd as well, because it sort of transposes what we're doing, so it's hard.
Yeah, we're used to looking at, like,
and I see it go to the right.
selfie camera, which is just like a mirror.
Yeah,
Whereas
so-
now we've got actual, this is what you're looking
So
at.
if I wear like something with writing on, does that mean it will appear the right way around?
Correct, it will.
I try that with this can.
Thatcher's Haze, cloudy Somerset
Do
cider.
not sponsor us, but we would be willing to consider sponsorship.
Oh hell, we would welcome it. Hi guys.
Or any source of income.
yeah, that too. So hi guys, it is the 7th of May. I nearly said 7th of April then, because that is how much I've lost track of what fucking time of the year it is. But yeah, it's the
Full
7th
disclosure,
of May.
Just before we started filming this, Ellie said to me, "The world has gone to shit." So I feel that might set the tone.
I don't think I did just say, just apropos of nothing, oh, by the way, the world's gone to shit. Let's film a blog.
No, you didn't say apropos of nothing, oh, by the way, the world's gone to shit. I'm just saying that was like the last sentence before we kind of set things going.
I don't think it was.
Why fight me on this? Why do you not think the world has gone to shit?
No, the world has gone to shit.
Stand by your comments.
I'll stand by my comments. But just confusing me. Right, sorry, yes. So it's the 7th of May, and it is also day 48. 40 fucking 8 of lockdown. 48.
We don't know of how many.
48
of... No.
Well, by the sounds of it, 48 of 51. Because they're talking about... No, right. I don't actually think they're talking about releasing lockdown on Monday. I don't even think that was ever anybody's plan.
It was heavily suggested.
Yeah, it was heavily suggested. I think so that, well,
they could... went a bit mad with it.
Yeah, so they could test the water and see what people actually think about, what people are actually thinking about lockdown. And also so that they could kind of sort of surreptitiously discredit the idea of lockdown, so that if they then go, no, we never said stop locking down, but if from this point onwards everybody goes all relaxed and just acts like twats, they can blame the people instead of the governments, because they were like, no, we never said that. That was essentially, it was a misleaked document which somehow managed to make it to front pages of at least 5 major newspapers overnight.
And this is leaked
in 1 week.
On what day? On
it was yesterday that it came through, so yeah.
On Thursday's papers, it's the front pages have all been, hey, happy Mondays, look forward to the lack of lockdown, and all these sort of silly headlines about how we're all going to have more freedom come Monday, which, excuse me, everyone knew it was going to be a gradual process anyway. It looked like it was going to start, or they were going to announce a start. It didn't mean everyone was going to return to work on Monday, because he's not announcing anything till Sunday night. So the idea that we'd all be back to normal on Monday is ludicrous, but it just feels like the press has handled it in a really irresponsible way, which is so unlike the British press.
I was going to say, they're normally so responsible about the way they handle things in the UK. We're really sensitive to the needs of the people and how their words might be interpreted, because I think.
We've already heard, I've seen on Facebook, and I believe you've heard from people, anecdotal evidence of shops and supermarkets and everywhere being busier, and people not really bothering with social distancing because they just think it's fine now, it's back to normal. I mean, they're going to tell us on Sunday we can go back to work on Monday, and they wouldn't say that if it wasn't basically already fine now. And because of the way this has all been reported in the media, people who don't do as much reading into these things as we do, I guess, have just kind of taken the ball and run with it.
Well, I mean, why would you? If you weren't inclined to be like us and sort of slightly obsessively reading too much information on the subject, I will admit, too much information on the subject, and it's driven me fucking mental. I wouldn't blame anyone for not doing that. But if you weren't going to read any information and you were just going to sort of casually glance at what the country has decided, you would go to your government, wouldn't you? As a sort of like, okay, well, what are we allowed to do? okay, let's look to those guys, and they'll tell me. And that has been a world of bullshit. A world of mixed messages and namby-pamby views of what we should be. Like, early on, when this all kicked off, very much wishy-washy, meaningless, platitudey sort of, oh, well, a good British spirit, and I'm still shaking hands with everybody, and come on, go, like all bullshit, absolute nonsense. But, you know, that was what they were going for, and then they went, oh, hang on, a load of people appear to be dying. That is inconvenient.
Not ideal.
I thought somehow by being British we would be immune to an indiscriminate virus that attacks humans. Because I went to Eton and I am not human, I am lizard kind. So yeah, why wouldn't they have... why wouldn't they have assumed that we'd all be fine? Because we're British, and our stiff upper lip would have given us immunity to this indiscriminate virus. So whole fucking thing is bullshit. And I can't keep having the same chat, essentially, of just how much bullshit are we willing to listen to? And yeah, just a never-ending hosepipe, industrial hosepipe of bullshit just being thrown out into the public consciousness at the moment, and I don't know where we're meant to be looking, like who are we meant to be looking at for actual guidance right now, because all of the broadsheets are, well, not all of the broadsheets, most of the broadsheets and all of the tabloids are being bullshit. And the other ones are kind of...
Because if you're trusting the government at this point, it just means you haven't been paying attention.
Yeah.
They've done such a kind of terrible job of everything and messed up so many things so comprehensively that you couldn't... You know, it's like something out of the thick of it.
Well, I was thinking it was more like something out of fucking Catch-22. Oh, you're still trusting what they say? Well, therefore, we are going to sign you off as fucking mentally incapacitated.
And then you'll have to do what they say because we've taken your hours away from you. It is crazy. Like, and the thing is, all this lockdown, the argument for kind of ending lockdown, like the kind of argument that's being put forward by experts as opposed to just people going, I want to go to the pub again.
Yeah, that's not an argument, is it?
The actual argument that's being put forward by experts is along the lines of kind of, well, you know, it's the longer it goes on, the worse it is for the economy, and you know, there's mental health effects of people being stuck in lockdown.
Yeah, there are knock-on effects from lockdown that might eventually mean that lockdown in itself is worse than the 1 to 2% of people who end up needing to be hospitalised with the virus.
These aren't ideas to be kind of dismissed out of hand, or certainly when we're talking about people's mental health or things that they might be going through, stuck in lockdown. That's not to be taken lightly, but equally there are knock-on effects of, you know, forcing people back into a work environment where they don't feel safe because, you know, they can't afford not to, and because the government has said lockdown's over, so their employers expect them back. And especially if it is still really unsafe and there's going to be a second wave, which would make things worse and ultimately could lead to a second lockdown and screw the economy up even worse. So we need to do these things when they're right. But even if, you know, you are of the mind that the economy is, you know, the tipping point has been reached and the economy, it'll have a worse effect on people and we'll lose more lives through the economy being in trouble than through, you know, letting people out and ending lockdown. And even if you think that tipping point has been reached, like, there are still loads of people dying, we're still going to infect a bunch of people, and once lockdown ends, that doesn't mean, hey, we don't have to worry about social distancing.
No.
We still are supposed to, like, don't be going to think, oh, they've said it's fine now, lockdown's ending, so we can all go and meet our friends, and we can all hang out, and we can, like, even as things are lifted, we're still supposed to keep distance, we're still supposed to kind of contact trace and all this stuff, which is not in place yet. And so, you know, the way the press is kind of treating it as like, hey, basically going like, hey, we're all going to have a happy bank holiday Monday.
Yeah.
We can all get to the pub and have a drink and see all our family.
The front pages of the newspapers today have been absolutely the epitome of irresponsible journalism, and you have to assume at that point there is an agenda being sold, because any journalist that is actually reading this story, like, so the story is the leaked proposals for what might be announced on Sunday. So if you know that this story that you're putting on your front page is a leaked story that hasn't been announced as law yet, or as even government guidance yet, maybe don't have your front page saying lockdown eased, cafes and pubs set to reopen their gardens and outdoor areas, like, because as I've mentioned, even if then on Sunday Boris Johnson and his little cronies all go, no, that was never the plan, that's in the public consciousness now. And I would believe that this was genuinely a leak if it had come out through one source. It came out on the front pages of at least 4 of the major newspapers at the same time, which means it was leaked to all of them. That is an embargoed press story that you're not allowed to publish until a certain date. Same as the Neil Ferguson shit yesterday, because that story actually related to stuff that happened at the start of April, but they wanted to sit on something until maybe the day that our death toll exceeded any other countries, and they went, oh, now's the time to do that story. They're playing a fucking game. Like, oh, right, okay, I'm fully acknowledging, by the way, I now sound like a lunatic conspiracy theorist. I'm only basing that on having worked in a press office. I know how stories get to the press. If you decide to leak a story to the press, you can say, I've got a story, and I will give it to you on the agreement that you won't publish it until these circumstances are met. And then if they do publish it before those circumstances are met, you can sue them. So they can't. So essentially, if they agree to the embargo, then they can't break the embargo. The fact that all of those newspapers all broke that story at the same time means that it wasn't an accidental leak. Because if somebody leaks a story, that's one person who works for a thing going, oh, I'm on something, and they tell a journalist, and that journalist tells their boss and goes, can we run this story? Fuck it, let's do it. It wouldn't hit several newspapers at the same time. That is a coordinated release of press. That is probably being released so that essentially they can test the water on what the public actually think about that and what the public actually do. Because then if the public all go mental and all go out and party like it's 1999, then they can essentially wash their hands and say, no, we never told you to do that. You just did that because you are idiots who just believe, you didn't check. We didn't actually tell you that was okay. You should have paid more attention to what we actually said, guys.
And there's a famous, I think was it after 9/11? Someone put a memo around, saying from the government saying today would be a good day to bury bad news.
I haven't heard that story, but I wouldn't be surprised at all by that story.
Kind of after 9/11, this memo went round in the government, like, today would be a good day to bury bad news.
Yeah.
Because, hey, 9/11
nobody's reading.
So this isn't going to be on the first 10, 15 pages of any newspaper.
Oh, I can well believe that.
All, and they got caught out, and it was a bit of a sort of minor scandal. But it would be so naive to imagine that the one time that got caught out was the one time that it happened. I imagine that sort of thing is happening all the time, whether it be the MPs choosing when to kind of reveal information, or whether the newspapers themselves are holding on to information, juggling with it.
We've got a juicy story, but we're going to hold on to it until
for maximum impact, or to serve their own particular agenda.
Or to distract from a story that our sister paper, basically not our sister paper, our rival paper. So if you're talking about the right versus left, it is absolutely insane that today's front pages were all about Neil Ferguson. Well, no, yesterday's were all about Neil Ferguson. Today's were all about lockdown being eased on Monday. as far as we know, lockdown isn't being eased on Monday.
Well,
And a scientific story that came out today, well, this didn't come out today like it was a big announcement. This is something that I've seen sort of creeping up on some people's news feeds going, hang on, guys. But hang on, maybe not, because, right, the one thing that they've sort of held high with what we need to be careful about at any point when it comes to releasing lockdown measures is the R rating. And the R rating is how many people, so if one person is infected, how many people they are likely to infect. And you shouldn't release lockdown until that is less than 1. So basically, and I think it's per day, but like one person might infect one other person per day, let's say. As long as it stays at that or below, they think that they can handle COVID if it stays at that rate, because of how many people don't get horribly sick with it. And sort of the people who do get horribly sick with it are in hospital with it for a very long time. That's one thing that is actually worth mentioning. There are people who got this quite early on in the crisis who are still in hospital now. But if we ignore that, the R rating is essentially how infectious it is. Now, that obviously the government has no call over how infectious a virus is, but by implementing social distancing measures and lockdown measures, they drag the rating of how often people infect other people down by forcing the scenario to be that people don't come into contact with other people and cross-infect, basically. So they were trying to drag that down, and over the last few days, the data seems to be that it's rising.
Yeah.
It went right down, and now it's gone back up.
So it seems very unlikely they're actually going to end lockdown. And what it makes, which is actually not good news, but is for the best of everybody at the moment. And what it's made me think is like these people who are talking about kind of mental health and kind of the negative effects of lockdown. I think not just about the people who are going out now and thinking everything's fine and they're spreading more germs around and coming into contact with more people and ignoring social distancing and making it harder for the rest of us who want to go to the shops and keep proper social distancing. That is all unpleasant. But if you're like being a good little citizen, and I don't mean that in the derogatory way that it sounds, but like if you're doing everything that the government is advising and you're staying home with your family, and maybe you saw the papers today and you went, oh brilliant, we're going to get to go out soon, it's going to be great, we can take the kids to see Nan, and we can go to the shops, and we can maybe go and have a meal at a cafe. That would be nice, just to kind of see some friends, and all, maybe I get to go back to work soon, and you're excited for all this stuff, but you're still being a good citizen. You're not going out today and doing it. You know, well, the announcement is on Sunday, so I'll wait and see what they say, but hopefully Monday we can start. You know, there'll be changes, but I'll wait until it's the official word, and then Sunday rolls around and they say no, obviously we're still carrying on lockdown because of the infection rate. And like, I think that if you're worried about people's mental health in lockdown, sensibly managing their expectations and not giving out sort of false hope only to dash that hope days later.
Absolutely.
Feels
I think
like the responsible approach. I don't know.
If you genuinely are giving a shit about people's mental health during this, what you need to be doing is reassuring everybody that they're not going to end up on the streets. Their bills will be paid, or they will be paused. Yeah, maybe maybe they'll still accrue interest, but they're not gonna be evicted. The bailiffs aren't coming around. Those sorts of things will be genuinely helpful to people's mental health. That they're not going to be evicted. That the bailiffs aren't coming around to steal all their stuff because they can't pay bills because they can't work. Maybe saying things like, "Oh yeah, we're going to be winding back the furlough scheme." That as they already said that furlough scheme is going until at least June. So don't start talking about, oh well, we'll definitely be winding that back because people are getting too used to it. It's like, we're not too used to anything right now. We're clinging on to the furlough scheme as the one fucking thing that means that we don't have to panic about the fact that we can't pay our bills, because if we just carefully make ends meet, we can just about make it work.
Because we're doing what we're told. And I kind of naively, I think, thought at the start of this, well, you know what, maybe we won't be going out to the cinema, we won't be going out to pubs and restaurants maybe will actually save a bit of money. But then, when you're on 80% of what is for me a part-time job anyway, and we've got cat food and things to pay for, and our rent and bills,
Vet bills.
like it doesn't stretch as far as you might think. So we're not sitting here going,
Yeah,
hey,
it's not
brilliant.
like...
and we're not complaining. We're better off than a lot of people. But equally, when people start to suggest, oh, well, people are getting used to these handouts, it feels like a bit of a kind of kick in the teeth when we've been told to stay home and we're doing as we're told.
Yeah, it's
essentially.
absolute... Oh, God, it's so insulting because it just shows a real lack of understanding of how real people live. Like, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, whatever you feel about the government, whatever you feel about any of this, if you are like a normal person, let's say you're earning less than 30,000 a year, so a normal average worker earning less than 30,000 a year, and either you are a key worker and you've been asked to continue working, that has got a huge amount of challenges with it, because personally I'm glad I'm not a key worker, because and again, I think it's important to mention, I'm not particularly terrified of catching COVID-19 myself. I know the stats sort of say that chances are I'd be okay. Chances are that I'd be all right. I probably would have a bad chesty cough, maybe pneumonia, but I'd probably be all right. I'm not actually desperately worried about myself if I catch COVID-19. What I am nervous about is if I catch it and I pass it on. Like, worst case scenario, I catch it, I have a mild case of it, but you get it really bad and then you're really ill with it and I blame myself for that. Or if I don't even necessarily have that direct knowledge of I caught it and then I gave it to so and so, but if through these measures lots of people start going back to work and then I hear that my mother or father, who have not been, like, they're retired, they're essentially doing all of the right things, they're staying at home, but they're taking one walk a day for exercise and they're going to the shop for essentials, they might cross paths with somebody who has this and then they might get this and it might not be a good end of the story for them. And that is always the case. Anybody could ever leave their house and catch something and become very ill with it, of course. But nobody has immunity to this. This is going to fly through the population in a way that flu doesn't. Because the flu is something that lots of the population already have had. They've had that strain. Yes, it mutates, and that's why we get the seasonal influxes. If this is just left to run rampant, then people, whoever you are, people you care about and people you love will catch this and will get very sick with it. Some people might catch it and be all right with it. Some people they came into contact with might die, and you, the person who just decided that, I'm really fed up of being at home right now, you might be the reason why somebody grows up without a dad or without a mum. And that, I know that's a very emotive and it might even seem hyperbolic, but it isn't, because people are dying with this every day. Every fucking day.
A few points on that. First of all, it reminds me of something that someone said really at the start of this whole thing, sort of a few months ago now, and someone said, if we have a lockdown and it works, if we go really strict lockdown and it works, this was that back when that still seemed like a choice, and we still thought, but if we caught it really early and had a lockdown and it really worked and we clamped it down, kind of like Germany have done, and it works and kind of we're all okay, then it will look like we've overreacted. And we need to be prepared to look as though we've overreacted, and I think that's still true now, right? Like the responsible thing to do
what
is
I would
to kind
give
of,
for us to look like we were being overcautious.
I mean,
right
things
now.
are already past that point. Like so many people have died, but we still need to kind of. It's better to overreact and save more lives than to go the other way. And like you said, like you could leave the house at any time and catch something and die, right? Whenever. But like to give an example, you could leave the house and die in a car accident. And that can happen to anyone, but it is the responsibility of drivers to try and drive as safely and carefully as possible, and to not drink, and to make sure they're checking their car, their tire pressure, and all the and
Yeah.
we look after each other as a society, and this is exactly the same thing. Like anyone could die of COVID-19, and we are responsible for trying to keep that as low as possible, right, as individuals, but also on the point that you said about, you're not so worried about catching it yourself, and that is fair enough. Like we are in a low risk group, but I read one of these guys who's advocating for people to kind of for lockdown to end, and he was saying, well, look, as long as we all go out, as long as we protect the most vulnerable groups, and keep those people safe, then the rest of us can basically go out and we'll have a controlled pandemic. A controlled, not pandemic. Epidemic, right? Which to me sounds like herd immunity under another name, because herd immunity has proven unpopular because it is bullshit. but so that's what he's advocating. And he was saying, well, in low risk groups, of which, that includes us, the chances of dying of COVID-19 are incredibly low, and that most people who have died of it had undiagnosed underlying health conditions. And I will tell you
Do
this.
you have any undiagnosed
I'll tell you
health
this about my
conditions?
underlying health conditions, Ellie. They are undiagnosed, if I have them at all.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I don't find that particularly reassuring, because I think I could be exactly the sort of person who has undiagnosed. I haven't been for a checkup in a long time.
I
Is
can
that still a
tell
thing,
you,
going for a
I've got
checkup?
actual health conditions that took about 5 years to diagnose, and that was when I had symptoms and I was going to specialists about them.
And
So I don't
nobody's
have a huge amount of faith that maybe some undiagnosed shit might not be bubbling along under the surface.
Nobody
Not
much
that
is
comforting.
getting diagnosed with things right now, are they? Because we can't get to the doctor. So it's all a fucking crapshoot, isn't it? So any one of us could literally die.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to sound scaremongery, but the idea that they're saying, oh, it's fine. Well, we don't know, because if we have an undiagnosed underlying health condition, we literally don't know about it.
It's undiagnosed.
Yes, impossible for us to know. We could be very sick, and I just anyway.
Well, it's the whole thing. Like, I don't know if we can just keep saying that. Like, normally, I think we're back, actually, in terms of how these blogs feel. They feel like we've gone back to square one a little bit. And I don't know if that's just because, mentally speaking, I feel like I've gone back to square one on this. When we were first talking about going into lockdown, and actually before we went into lockdown, but when it was being talked about, my anxiety levels were very high, and I was imagining all of these terrifying scenarios where we start to see similar things happening here as are happening in Italy, and we start looking at their death figures and all of those sorts of things. And then we went into lockdown, and then we were looking at the figures, and we were doing our own little thing from our own little bubble as much as we could, and I started to get the sense that this is all bonkers and I have no control over everything that happens outside of these doors, but I'm starting to get used to this, and the numbers have gone up and they're starting to go down, and I'm starting to feel like this is awful, but it's so awful, but it's also abstract. I'm not on the front line, I'm not in A&E, I'm not in a COVID ward, I'm not dealing with the aftermath of this, and it's starting to subside, and I was just sort of starting to feel like that was where we were at. And now they're talking about easing lockdown, and even if they don't ease lockdown, that idea has been put out there now, and that has already seen an upsurge in people using public transport and people just going out and about.
More
and
people in shops, people
more
behaving
people doing
less responsibly, and
and
it's just
those people might not be the ones who are the first wave of red shirts, but those people might take this back home to their elderly aunt, or they happen to just walk past their neighbour who, like, their front doors are next to each other, and they like get this. Like, the more people are out and about, this virus, it's not like it just like floats around. It's not like a noxious gas that is just floating around, and if you happen to walk into it, it's only moved by people. If people don't move, the virus doesn't move. If you have it and you don't go anywhere, you're not spreading the virus. If you have it and you walk around and you go where other people walk around and touch things and they get it and they breathe those things, the virus doesn't move, we move the virus. So if we stop moving, the virus stops moving. And I get it, and also, like, people who are like, oh, well, I want to be able to do stuff. All right, fine, you do. But key workers are key workers for a reason, because people going, oh, well, they're allowed to go to work, then I should be. Yeah, but they're allowed to go to work because they work in a supermarket, and I don't know about you, but I need to eat to live.
Yeah,
so
a lot of them are having a miserable time.
Yeah, they don't want to be there any more than you don't want to be stuck at home.
I have a very close personal relationship with someone who works in a supermarket, and they are not
having a good time.
And I won't go into too much detail about that because I don't know. But yeah, I tell you what, it's been quite a serious one today, isn't it?
It has.
We kind of really need to wrap up because we've already kind of overrun.
Oh my God, we've crossed the 32-minute mark.
But what I will say is, earlier today, I recorded
Pause the Crowd!
Pause the Crowd!
Are we doing the
online comedy panel show, which was live streamed, but it's still available to watch, and we'll put the
we will put
link in
the
the comments.
link
I mean, I
in the
can't
comments.
imagine that if you've not seen any of the others of these,
just pipe up with these at the end of a really grim.
Well, I know, because like we're literally out of time, and when else was it going to fit in? But if you've watched this and you haven't seen any of the others, I can't imagine you're looking at me as being much of a purveyor of sort of Glee. But
it's properly funny.
It was
I
fun,
promise.
And we'll put the link in the thing, and it's you know, something you can do in these lockdown times. Watch a panel show with some comedians. It'll be a laugh.
It will be. I highly recommend it. We've got to go. We've got to go. Yeah, let's carry on drinking. We got to go. We got to go, mofos. I can't pull that off, can I?
No.